honey. I like it. I use it. I have a little. I keep it in a jar on top of my refrigerator. I'd like to put more in that jar. That's where you come in.
The G-Man is back.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, joining me now as my very special guest is Congressman James B. Renacci. He represents the 16th District of Ohio in the United States House of Representatives. And Congressman, welcome to the program. Thank you for sharing your time with us.
Morning, Gordon. How are you?
Oh, I'm well, thank you. I'm delighted to be able to report. Now, these jobs figures that the government puts out, the official rate went down 0.1% to 8.1. But of course, it doesn't take into account all the people who have just given up and aren't even looking for a job now. If they were counted, I think it would be something like 11%, would it not?
Yeah, it'd be a little over 11%, and that's the problem. In April, 342,000 people just stopped looking for work, dropping them out of the labor force. So it's startling because we're just not going in the right direction, even though the unemployment number did go from 8.2 to 8.1%.
What's going to be the fate of all of these young people this is, the 7th or so of May. All the colleges are graduating now, and they're pouring young college-educated people out into the labor market, and it doesn't look like it's very good for them.
No, and you're right, and it shows right now that 63.6% of the people, it's the lowest rate since 1981. So we're going back to 1981 rates, and what we have to do is really get this economy moving in the right direction. We have to have a government that understands that they don't create jobs, but they can definitely create situations that make people uncomfortable with adding jobs, creating jobs. I was a small business owner for 28 years before I went into Congress just 15 months ago, and I can tell you right now, as a job creator, as someone who was looking always to add positions, it's very tough today when you don't know what your tax rates are going to be. You don't know what your regulatory environment is, how much more the EPA is going to add in regulations, or just some of the other regulatory bodies coming out of Washington. Certainty and predictability is a problem. We have to be able to bring that back and allow businesses to understand what they have in their future so they're willing to step out and hire people. And you're right, we've got a number of colleges, a number of college students. My son will be graduating this year, and it's going to be tough to find a job.
It sure is. Now, I'm just wondering, your dad was a railroad worker and your mom was a nurse, and you took advantage of the great engine of social mobility in this country. You worked hard. You had 3 Harley-Davidson dealerships, and made it, so to speak. Does it annoy you when the president attacks people like you who have lived the American dream, done, as he put it, worked hard, played by the rules, and you succeed, and then he turns on you and says all these nasty things about you because you've been successful?
Well, exactly, and that's I've heard him say that time and time again. He said it in the State of the Union address. When you work hard, play by the rules, you should be successful. I came from a blue-collar union family. The only thing I was taught was that there's opportunity out there, and you looked to those that did well as someone you'd say, you know what, I'd like to have the opportunity. And when you look at my life and my career, I started out with nothing. I started out with a couple $100 in the bank account, moved to Ohio and thought, this is the land of opportunity. I'm going to make it work. I had my ups and I had my downs, just like anyone would, but I kept working hard, putting the hours in, and I was successful and owned and operated a number of businesses. First person in my family to go to college. I paid for it by working. And so those were all the things that the president talks about. I live the American dream, and I'm concerned that our children and our grandchildren aren't going to have those same opportunities if we continue down the path that the president and his administration has taken us right now.
Yeah. Well, I just want you to know that I have owned 5 Harley Davidsons.
The Harley Davidson dealerships of America, thank you for that.
Yeah.
It's interesting because not only did I have Harley Davidson dealership, I had a Chevy dealership, and one of the reasons I'm in Congress is they took that Chevy dealership from me. And I thought, this was the darkest day in American capitalism when the government can step in and tell somebody, you can no longer be in business in this country. And when I tell people that story, it's amazing because they look at me and say, well, at least you stepped up. I said, well, I did because that's what I wanted to pass on to my children and grandchildren, that Chevy dealership, and they took it from me.
Yeah, what was the justification or the rationale for taking that away from me? I mean, how did they get away with something like that?
Well, it was interesting because I was fighting it. I had 50, see, people forget that, those dealerships, I had 50 employees at my dealership, and I was fighting for them, and they knew it. And today they would all stand behind me if I called them up and said I have an issue because they saw me fight for them, and there was no rationale. I took a dealership that was in trouble, turned it around. It was doing just fine. I was not going anywhere. In fact, I was going to build a brand new dealership out on the highway. What I was told was that, and this was the most interesting thing, when I finally, when representatives from General Motors came in and said, look, we like the way you operate. We like everything you're doing. We just think that you're going to compete with the 2 closest dealerships to you. And I said, great. Isn't that what America is all about? And they said, well, somebody's going to lose. And I said, well, let's let competition make that decision, not the government. And of course, that's the only reason I really got was that I would be competition for the other dealerships around me.
Well, as you say, that's what the way it's supposed to work in this country. It's not supposed to work that the government comes in and anoints somebody as the winner. The public's supposed to anoint the winner by, whom they patronize.
Well, it's exactly true, and the fear is that if they can do that in my world, in the Chevy dealership, how many more times can they do that? And it is a scary situation when the government, let's face it, when the government makes decisions like Solyndra, and they make a decision to invest in that organization, how about all the organizations that didn't get those dollars that want to be startups and want to try? The government should not be picking winners and losers.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Oh, boy. Well, what do you think is the reason that people are just out of desperation, I guess, abandoning even a search for a job? I mean, I can't see you or anyone like you, giving up on yourself.
Yeah, it's interesting. I look back at my dad who lost his job when I was 8 years old, and we had to sit around the kitchen table and wonder. I watched my mother and dad wonder how they were going to make ends meet. But the one thing my dad never did was give up on looking for a job. And he would, he took a job digging ditches. I always remember that story. And then he went to a beer distributor and worked there until he ended up. And again, in his career, I give him credit. Only going to high school, he continued to look and ended up being the general manager of a large wholesale building supply business. So he never quit, and that generation wouldn't quit. And I think we have to make sure that people today understand opportunity is there. Don't quit. We need to be able to move forward, and that American dream is possible. But we got to make sure that we give everybody the opportunity to be able to live the American dream.
Yeah. Well, it's this current situation is really bad. I try to explain it to people that if I'm going to go into business manufacturing widgets, I've got to be able to know how much the metal that goes into my widget is going to cost me, how much the labor of the people who bend the metal of my widget is going to cost me, and how much the taxes are going to cost me, and how much the regulations are going to cost me. And if I can't predict those, I'd be insane to start the business.
Exactly right. You have to have that certainty and predictability. And that doesn't mean 10-year certainty or 10-year predictability, but we are not giving the American business, small business owner today, any certainty and predictability for the next even 3 to 10 months. I mean, look, nobody even knows what's going to happen to the tax rates come January 1. They're all going up if nothing happens, and that's a concern, because if they're going up, how does the small business owner, which, by the way, 70% of the small business owners in this country pay taxes on an individual basis through S-corps or the taxation ability to pass on to your individual tax return. How do they? Why would they hire somebody when they got to sit there and say, "Well, my taxes are going to go up in January 1. My regulations, I'm not sure what's next." It's a situation that makes it very difficult for these small business owners to really decide to move forward or not.
All right. Well, Congressman, we need to take a little pause for the benefit of our advertisers. Can you afford the time to just stand by for a few minutes while we get that taken care of and I get back to you?
Sure.
Thank you very much. Folks, I'm speaking with Congressman Jim Renacci. He represents the 16th Congressional District of the state of Ohio, which is, one of the great battleground states for this November election. We'll be right back after these words.
So unemployment has dropped. Well, it has dropped. You know why it's dropped? Because over 4% of the people...
hacerlo usted?
That's 1-800-507-5898. Making your facility... to faucets to greener cleaning supplies that help lower... /green. Granger, for the ones who get it done. Can't get enough of the G-Man? Follow him on Twitter. The G-Man is back.
And I'm in mid-conversation with Congressman Jim Renacci. He is the representative of Ohio's 16th Congressional District. And Congressman Renacci, let's say you are one member of the famed class of 2010. Something like 89 new members of the House that came in at that time. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, I was just elected in 2010. I've been there for 15 months approximately.
Okay, now I want to ask you, one reads that there's tension sometimes, let's put it that way, between the 89 new folks who just came in, sponsored many of them by the Tea Party, and promising to cut spending and limit government, and there's sort of a tension between them and what I will, for want of a better phrase, call the institutional Republicans, the ones who've been there, since Moses parted the Red Sea. Any truth to that?
Well, anytime you bring in 80-plus new members, you're always going to have differences of opinions. And one thing I've learned over the last 15 months, it's amazing the differences of opinion you have. But I will tell you this, that the majority of the new members believe we have to make changes to our system. We also know that we have to do it in a way that continues to create jobs and keeps the economy going forward. And some of the new members, a large majority of that 80-plus members, are business owners who have had to live with the rules that Congress makes. And that's what I've said all along. One of the biggest problems with Congress is we send, and I can blame myself over the many years, we've sent people down to Washington that have never had to live within the rules that they make. So that itself causes some tensions down there. But I will say Speaker Boehner allows good conversation between all the members. We meet at least once a week, if not more. There's good discussion. And it's kind of like when you sit around the Thanksgiving table, you're never, with your family, you're never going to get total agreement. And I always said, put 240 people in a room and see how much agreement you're going to get out of that group, too. So, but I do say the one thing we all agree on is we have to cut spending, we have to get this debt in line, and we have to make sure that our children and grandchildren have the same future that we had.
Do your constituents, when you go out into your district, do they understand Washington speak? By that I mean, do they understand when the Democrats screaming that you're making dreadful cuts in this and that and the other thing, that all you're doing is reducing the rate of increase?
Well, one of the things that I try and tell them all the time is we have a system, we have systematic problems in Washington. I learned this in the business world. You can't go in, you have to fix systems. You have to cut, but you have to fix systems at the same time. And until we fix the systems in Washington, it's going to stay broken. And until people have the political courage to say we need to fix the systems, it's going to continue to stay broken. And that's my biggest fear. We have been able to cut spending for the last 2 years, but not enough to even, dampen the amount of debt that's growing. The problem is the systems are broken. We have Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security systems that were put in place 40-plus years ago. They are great systems. But if you talk to a business owner, and I try and explain this to everybody in my district, if you talk to anybody in business or even in their family lives, do they still live the same way, or do they still operate the same way they did 42 years ago? No. They change. And what's happened in Washington, a lot of these systems have not changed.
Yeah. Now, your fellow members, your colleagues of the 80-some-odd new folks coming in, do you have your own caucus? We have our freshman caucus that stays together, and we try and work together. In fact, myself and another gentleman just pulled together a social freshman group because at some point in time we have to just get away and talk amongst ourselves, and we're starting to do that too. And in many ways we're getting frustrated because we want to make changes quickly, but we realize that it took us 100 years to get here. We're not going to be able to fix it in 15 months. And I think that's really the key that Americans have to understand. And I tell people in my district, I don't want to be there long term. I didn't go to Washington for a career. I didn't go there for a long term. I want to go there, fix it, and come home. And that's got to be the goal. Can't blame you for that. Now, your state is going to be the, if not the, battleground states of all battleground states. How's it look in Ohio for the presidential election from your perspective?
Well, again, I think people in Ohio are frustrated. We've been hit pretty hard with employment, and the unemployment has grown here. But, one thing good about Ohio is resilient. We have a governor now that is making some of those tough changes, and I know people don't like some of those tough changes, but he's moving toward balancing a budget and growing a rainy day fund, all those things that have to happen. So, and a lot of that's coming because we have this new oil and gas growth.
Congressman, we've run out of time. I want to thank you so much for being my guest and look forward to having you again.
Well, thank you so much, too. I enjoyed it.
Thank you, sir. Congressman